Good afternoon, UFC fans, and welcome to a UFC 265 edition of the Big D Podcast. Before I bring in today's special guest, please subscribe, like, and share the Spunky Spectrum Sports YouTube page, where we've got a lot of content up and coming soon, so can't wait to share it with you. So, if you remember a few weeks ago when we did a UFC 264 edition. I brought this guy in, so I figured for the next UFC pay-per-view, it'd be as the legendary Bruce Buffer, UFC ringside announcer Bruce Buffer would say, "It's time." From San Diego, it's my friend Brett Appley from the DailyFanMMA.con's. Brett, you ready for UFC 265 in Houston?
What's going on, man? Yes, I am ready. There's a lot of great fights. We have ourselves an interim championship at the top, some big prizes on DraftKings as always. So I'm in the mix of things here, man. I'm getting my breakdowns ready. I'm looking forward to cranking out a bunch of content this week. Should be a fun card.
Yeah, can't wait to see what happens this weekend in Houston. Unfortunately, one fight we will not be seeing is arguably not just the best female UFC fighter, but quite possibly the best pound-for-pound fighter going right now. That's Amanda Nunes and Pena. Unfortunately, as most UFC fans know, Nunes tested positive for COVID this past weekend, so she won't be fighting. And be honest, I think we both knew what Pena would be getting this weekend. It'd either be a knockout or a submission, right?
I do believe so. Yeah, she would have been a very, very big. I mean, she was a heavy favorite, and I think everyone would have been picking her to win. And it's not that Pena's a terrible opponent. She's skillful. She's coming off a good submission win, but I mean, when you look into the numbers, Pena just she lands 2.8 strikes per minute. That's not going to get it done against Nunes, and Pena defends takedowns at 23%, which is just awful. And so Nunes pretty much would have been able to do whatever she wanted, I think. Whether or not it would have been an early finish or a late finish or a decision, I'm not totally sure. But Nunes would have won that fight, I'm pretty confident in saying. And it's definitely a disappointment that they're not going to be on this card. But hopefully just we'll be rebooked to a better card later this year.
Yeah, I saw some of the odds, and Nunes even minus 1,000 favor, and I'm surprised those odds weren't higher.
Yeah, I mean, people probably would have even been parlaying her at that price. It was 10-1. So once you get up that high, it's just it's not as much reward for your risk. So people aren't making big bets at minus 1,000, but I definitely think that number was correct, if not too low. Like you said, I think Nunes wins that fight at a very, very high percentage.
Yeah, do you think yeah, speaking of DraftKings, you think Nunes would have been how expensive do you think she would have been? 10K maybe?
Um, if I had to guess, I would say maybe like 9,800. We have Gane at 9,400 right now, and he's pushing minus 400 to win. So 96, 98. I don't think she would have gotten to 10K. It's possible, but I think upper mid 9Ks is probably where she would have fallen, and I think people would have still rostered her at a high percentage at that price.
Yeah, I'm not sure what Nunes ownership would have been in GPPs, but she would have been like 95, 98% owned in cash games.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, yeah, off the top of my head, I would say 60%, low 60% if she was in the upper nines. But like you said, in cash games, borderline 100%, everyone would have played her.
Yeah, so hopefully we see that fight sooner or later. So now we get to UFC 265, where we've got an interim heavyweight championship bout between Ciryl, Gane, and Derrick Lewis this week. If you look at it, These are two big boys going in the ring. Gane is a minus 380 favorite, while Lewis is plus 290. Gane has pretty much been unbeatable, 9-0 in his MMA career, while Lewis, when I look at it, he's got some power, but you're going up against a guy who's not lost in the UFC. What happens in the main event?
I'm definitely picking Ciryl Gane to win this fight. I think Derrick Lewis is a fun fighter. He's super funny, and he's going to be in front of a crowd that loves him in Houston, Texas. And obviously, we talk about the power all the time with Derrick Lewis, and I think he holds the UFC record at heavyweight for most knockouts. One punch can truly change the dynamic of this fight, and you can never count Derrick Lewis out of a fight. But with that said, he's just still extremely limited, and he's not going to wrestle. He averages half a takedown per 15 minutes, and I would be pretty shocked if he had any wrestling success in this matchup. And otherwise, he just, he lands a very low percentage of a very low volume of strikes. He doesn't throw strikes very often, and he doesn't have many tools to win rounds. So he's very, very dependent on a knockout. And Ciryl Gane is 9-0. He does have flaws in his game, but I think he's going to be a future champion. And I don't just mean interim champion. I mean UFC heavyweight champion. I think he has a very good chance of beating Francis Ngannou if that fight should play out after this one. Gane is he is excellent at distance management, range management, and it's very difficult to hit him. He's going to be a little bigger than Lewis too, but yeah, so far Gane's landed 5.13 significant strikes per minute, 2.6 absorbed per minute, 63% striking defense. For comparison, Derrick Lewis has a 44% striking defense. So basically, I think Gane is going to just dominate this fight at range. He's going to be very, very cautious. Maybe he doesn't knock Lewis out early, and maybe he doesn't, try and wrestle, but I do think he's going to be cruising in this fight until should one big punch land from Lewis. Even in Lewis's last fight against Curtis Blades, who Derrick Lewis won that fight by knockout very impressively. Curtis Blades was beating him up at range for the entire first round, and Derrick Lewis only actually landed 7 strikes in that fight compared to 28 of Blades. And Gane is a much superior striker to Curtis Blades. So I just think this will be a pretty dominant performance from Gane, with the exception of Derrick Lewis is still going to try and wing punches at him, and if one lands, there's always that possibility. I don't think it happens at a high rate. I think Gane should be deserved of his heavy betting line, but in the heavyweight division, you never say never, and we've seen Lewis come back many times before. So it's a possibility for sure, but I'm expecting a good performance and a win from Gane on Saturday.
I would say if this fight gets past the second round, the Frenchman has got a not just big, but a strong possibility of winning this bout. I think Lewis needs this fight early because one problem that I've seen with Lewis is that he has tired now. True, a couple of we know what kind of power he brings, but Gane has shown in a couple of his fights he can go 5 rounds, and in this interim heavyweight championship bout, you'll need that extra conditioning, and Lewis has not gone 5 rounds in any of his fights recently.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's funny because Lewis actually has a fair number of finishes that have come late in fights, round 4, round 3, round 3. So he does, like, that power does translate into later rounds. However, I still think, Gane, if this fight still is playing out by round 3, by round 4, I think Gane will have racked up a lot of damage, and he definitely has better cardio than Derrick Lewis. So I do agree with you. I think the best chance for Lewis to score that big knockout would come early.
Yeah, instead of 7 significant strikes, it might be 1, and just a right hand to the jaw, boom, fight over, give me the belt, or at least the interim belt.
Yeah, and he'll do his gravedigger um, victory celebration, and then they'll match him up against probably Francis Ngannou, and that'll be. Well, I mean, they've already, to be honest, they've already fought once before, and that was a horrible, horrible fight. But I still think people would be excited for a rematch between Derrick Lewis and Ngannou should that happen. But um, I think Gane versus Ngannou is the matchup that we'll ultimately see.
Yeah, Derrick Lewis beat Ngannou July of 2018 and only landed 20 significant strikes in that
Yeah.
bout. He only scored 38 DraftKings points. I'm like, how the heck do you only score 38 points in a win?
I think that may be the lowest score in history on DraftKings. Without joking, I think he holds yet another record.
But yet he got the win, and that's all
Mm-hmm.
that matters. I mean,
That's
his
all that
corner.
matters.
So now we get to probably the most intriguing fight of the night, and it's the bantamweight showdown between Jose Aldo and Pedro Munhoz. Obviously, when you think of this, you've got two guys, both of them Brazilian, so you know the jiu-jitsu will probably be a main factor in this. What do you think happens in the co-main event?
Yeah, well, I see. I'm not totally sure. Aldo is, let's see, how old is Jose Aldo now?
They're
I don't think
both
he.
34.
Okay, so his age doesn't like show his wear and tear. I mean, he's fought 36 times professionally. He's been fighting professionally since 2004. So he's only 34 years old, but he has a lot of fights under his belt. The way that I look at Aldo now is he's still a dangerous striker. He's still very defensively sound, doesn't ever get out grappled, defends strikes really well, but it's hard for him to push a pace. His durability is wearing down. Um, Pedro Munhoz is opposite in a lot of ways. He's super aggressive. He throws a ton of strikes. Um, a very good submission grappler. He has one of the best guillotines in the sport, but he doesn't have great defense. He gets hit 5.87 significant strikes per minute. I mean, he's fought a few of these guys, like Aljamain Sterling landed 174 strikes on him in 3 rounds. Frankie Edgar, 135 strikes and a couple takedowns. The thing is, Aldo cannot push that kind of pace. Aldo's coming off a win in which he landed 44 strikes. So I do think Aldo's better technically here. Aldo's a more dangerous striker, a more defensively sound striker, probably has more power. He's not going to be out grappled, but there's still ways for him to lose, most notably just by Munhoz throwing a ton of strikes and, you know, making the viewers and the judges think that he's putting up a higher pace, he's landing more volume. It's as simple as that. So I definitely I favor Aldo because of his technique and you know, his defense, but I'm very interested to see if Munhoz can push the kind of pace that will tire Jose Aldo out. I don't think Munhoz is going to get a finish, but I do think it's possible that he just, like I said, pushes a pace, super aggro, throws a lot of volume, and that's enough to edge out some close rounds.
You know, one thing I've seen with Munhoz in five of his last 7 fights have gone to decision, but in a lot of those fights he's not just taken damage but created a lot of damage. He racked up 94 significant strikes against Rivera's, 166 against Edgar, 105 against Sterling, 117 against John, 69 against Dotson, and of course the 2 first-round knockouts. So yes, Aldo may be the more consistent fighter, but again, Munhoz brings a lot of energy, and this is a cardio contest. Munhoz might have the upper hand.
No, yeah, I would agree. And you mentioned that fight against Jimmy Rivera where he landed 93 significant strikes. 40 of them were leg strikes. So he had like Jose Aldo can throw leg kicks too, and is very dangerous at it, but he just doesn't very often. Munoz throws a ton of leg kicks, and that is not head damage, but that slows fighters down. That hurts fighters. And if he's going to go out there and throw another 52 leg kicks at Jose Aldo, that could be impactful. I mean, that could definitely slow Aldo down and give Munoz an edge in those latter rounds. And I'll be very interested to see who holds the leg kicking advantage in this fight, because that could be a reason why Munoz wins or loses.
It's just an intriguing fight, and I think one that could go either way. That's why the odds are so close, because it's like I think Aldo is minus 115, Williams is 105. So the odds makers are seeing it as a pretty even fight. So I think it's one that could go either way. We'll just wait and see.
Yep.
So what other fights are you looking forward to potentially betting or looking at betting this weekend?
Well, to be fair, I am still early in my research because it's only Tuesday, but from a fan perspective and a fight that I do think could score well on DraftKings, and I've seen a lot of people on this fighter too. Chiesa versus Luque, which is also in the main event, main card. I think it's going to be a really fun fight. Luque is always in really fun fights, and even if they go to decision, they're crazy fights, like the one against Stephen Thompson, and he had a fight against Mike Perry that was crazy. But typically he wins or loses inside the distance, and he's going to be a very dangerous striker in this matchup against Chiesa, who I still don't think has much of a striking game. Chiesa only lands 1.8 strikes per minute, and may get damaged and finished if the fight plays out on the feet. But Chiesa is an excellent wrestler and grappler, lands 3.6 takedowns per 15 minutes. Luque hasn't really been tested on the ground that much recently. I'm looking through his fight history. I mean, the last time he was really out wrestled was Leon Edwards in 2017. So it'll be really interesting to see if Chiesa can put that style on him. And for the most part, Chiesa's done that to the majority of his competition. I mean, he has losses to Anthony Pettis and Kevin Lee, but 4 consecutive wins, looked great against Neil Magny in his first main event. And I think that fight is going to be an absolute banger. I'm really excited for that one. Another fight that I'm interested in from a DraftKings perspective is the opening fight on the card between Johnny Munoz and Jamie Simmons, who are both 0-1 in the UFC. I don't think either fighter's like the most talented, but both guys are aggressive grapplers. Munoz lost his UFC debut, but he attempted 16 takedowns in that fight. And he's a black belt in jiu-jitsu, and now he's fighting an opponent in Simmons who also likes to wrestle but doesn't have that same level of jiu-jitsu game. So I think both guys are just going to basically brawl on the ground. I could see both guys landing some takedowns early, but I think there's a ton of grappling potential in that fight. There's going to be a ton of ground exchanges, and I'm expecting Munoz to come out ahead because he really is the better submission grappler there. Simmons, we only saw once in the UFC. He got knocked out by Giga Chikadze, so he's dropping down a weight class. Still, I just don't think Simmons is quite ready for the UFC level, and I've been pretty impressed with what I've seen on the ground for Munoz. And look, anyone who can attempt 16 takedowns in a 15-minute fight, I am very interested in that fighter, and I think we're going to see a fun grappling fight there to start the card.
Yeah, two similar fighters with similar pedigrees, and plus a lot of DFS users may not be great about using the first fight because they think, oh, if my guy gets knocked out or submitted early, I'm screwed. Well, that's a little bit of counterintuitive, and I'm thinking I might want to play that. I might want to play that fight and get an upper hand.
Well, exactly, and like you said, it's the first fight of the card. This is going to be a public card, UFC 265. We're going to see public money come in, and Munhoz is priced up there at 9.1K. Do you want to play Munhoz, who's 0-1 in the UFC, who's only scored, 60 points in a loss? Or do you want to play bigger names like Ciryl, Gane, and Fiziev, who seems to be a really fun talent? Alonzo Menafield has a lot of knockout power, and they're all priced right above him. So I think a lot of the public players will just look to the big names, which is fine because they have upside too. But we know that wrestling and grappling scores very, very well on DraftKings, and I think Munoz's ownership is going to be lower than it should be come Saturday just based on his upside.
So now we switch from betting the DFS, and when you look at the DraftKings pricing, as you would expect, Ciryl Gane is the most expensive fighter, 9,400. Fiziev, is that how?
Fiziev, yeah.
Fiziev is second most expensive, 93. Menafield 92, Munhoz at 91, pay at $9,000, and where are you thinking of spreading the wealth on your DFS lineups?
Well, I think it's that range. I mean, I think all the first four fighters you named, I think are going to get a lot of ownership and are worth targeting because as you drop down in price, Miles Johns at 8.9K isn't very exciting. Gatto at 8.8, Torres at 8.7. She's not a typical scorer. Aldo at 8.6, is knockout or bust there. So I don't really like this upper 8K range. So when I have the salary, I'm going 9.1K and above. And I think Gane's an obvious target. He's the main event favorite. He can land a ton of volume over 25 minutes. And he also has a minus 105 line to win inside the distance. So he very well might score a knockout too. So I think Gane is going to rate out among the best overall fighters on this slate. I think he's a great option. He's going to be very popular, but if you have the salary, he's worth paying up for. Menafield and Fiziev right there are more knockout or bust, I would say. Last I checked, Menafield had the best finishing line on this entire card. And I see him now at minus 145 on some books. So that is a big number. Menafield is going to be very, very boom or bust, meaning if he doesn't get that early knockout, he's done. Crush your lineup. He's done, exactly. But a minus 145 inside distance line tells me that he does have a pretty decent chance that early finish. So even though he's risky, he's still worth targeting at that price. And we already talked about Munhoz, who's going to be my, sneaky play of this top range. I really like Munhoz there at 9.1K.
To me, I think the fight that could really determine whether you win or lose on Saturday night might be the Gane and Yodong fight because both of them are equally priced. And I remembered from that last UFC pay-per-view event where both main event fighters were in the McGregor fight where both fighters were the same price. I think Conor was 82 and
yeah, they were both 81 in that fight. Yeah,
both 81. And I think this fight with both fighters being 80, one being 82 and the other one being $8,000 could shake up lines because if you pick the right side of that, you look golden, and if you don't, you might need a few bucks for the next pay-per-view event.
Yeah, and I'll say, the difference between McGregor and Poirier at 8.1K versus Kenny and Yadong at 8.2 and 8 is that one of them was McGregor versus Poirier. We know that fight is going to score well. That fight was very, very likely to end with a finish or
It was going to
5 rounds.
it was going to be a knockout. Just didn't know it'd be Conor McGregor's leg knocking himself out, but that's story for me.
Right. Right. And so the difference between that fight and this fight, I would say, is that there's just not as good of a chance for Kenny and Yadong to score a knockout as there was with McGregor and Poirier. I'm looking at the fight right now. It's minus 200 to actually go the full 15 minutes. It doesn't mean that we won't see a big score from the winner. I think Kenny has some more wrestling upside in that matchup. And I think we could see, 85, 90 points from the winner, but I don't think we're as likely to see a quick knockout. The odds just don't tell me that. And Kenny's never been knocked out in his entire career. Yadong's pretty tough as well. So you're right in the sense that there's, the winner will put you in a good spot. I just don't think there's as much potential with the winner there if we're comparing it to McGregor and Poirier, just because the odds indicate that the fight is pretty likely to go to decision.
Is there anybody you would fade on this call?
Yes. And again, I haven't done my full slate of research, but a couple of, fighters I've already mentioned here. Torres at 8.7K. I think she has a relatively high floor in a win, but Torres is only minus 135 to actually win her fight, and it's very, very likely to go to decision. And at 8.7K, I just don't think she's likely to score 95, 100 points in a win. Angela Hill is pretty tough. The only finish Torres has in her entire career was her most recent fight, but it was a doctor stoppage, so it doesn't really count. And I think she's likely to score in the 80s if she wins, if that. So 8.7K, I don't love Torres' upside. I'm also not going to be playing Jose Aldo, really, because he will not score well unless he wins by knockout. And even if he does win by knockout, we saw a second-round knockout from him against Renato Moicano, and he only put up 80 points. It's just because he doesn't really wrestle and he doesn't really throw a ton of volume. So you need an early finish from Jose Aldo. Pedro Munhoz, his opponent, who we already talked about, has never been finished in his entire career. And another aspect of this that we already talked about as well, it's a public card. So people who don't play DraftKings often, they come in, they say, oh, Jose Aldo, I know who that fighter is. He's great. I'm going to play him. So his ownership, I think, is going to be higher than what it should be for his actual chances to win by quick knockout.
Could Torres be a better cash game play?
Yes, though I wouldn't prioritize her because she's only minus 135 to win. And I actually like the other side of that in cash games because you look at Angela Hill at 7.5K.
It lets you play the Gane and you need that cheap value at 7.5 or whatever.
Well, right. And Angela Hill is only plus 110, plus 115 to win. So she's actually pretty likely to win compared to her 7.5K betting line. And you're very, very likely to get 3 rounds from her. So, is she guaranteed to smash? No, but you're getting 3 rounds of a very close fight for 7.5K. That's the kind of fighter that I would look toward in cash games.
Somebody wants a bet for UFC 265 on the phone, of course. So now I figured we end this episode with a hashtag Trivia Tuesday segment. Houston's been a destination for at least 3 UFC pay-per-view events. Brett, do you remember the first UFC pay-per-view event in Houston?
I don't remember it because I'm terrible with names of cities, and I only have so much memory space in my head, and after one fight ends, I'm like, okay, I got to reset this memory bank of mine and move on to the next week. So to answer your question, No, I do not remember what the first fight in Houston was.
Well, you remember who was in the main event of that UFC 69, April 2007? It involved a famous UFC fighter.
So, so is this GSP versus Matt Serra?
Yeah, when Matt Serra knocked out GSP.
There you go. That's yeah, a little before. Don't think DraftKings existed then, but now that you mention it, it does bring back memories.
I don't think I'm not sure if the iPads existed back in 2007. I think Facebook may have been in its infancy. I don't think Zoom was available then either.
No, I don't think so either. And gambling was certainly frowned upon.
Yeah, look at how times had changed. And then the other UFC pay-per-view events in Houston were one UFC 192 involving Daniel Cormier and Alexander Gustafsson, and the recent 262 in May between Oliveira and Chandler.
Yep, and that was very recently. That was a great fight. And what's funny is you mentioned the GSP Matt Serra because that was off the Ultimate Fighter where Matt Serra won the Ultimate Fighter, right, and then was able to challenge GSP for the title. That was, if you said that was 2007, that's something that still exists. The Ultimate Fighter. We're now on season 29 and counting. I don't know if you're watching much of the Ultimate Fighter these days, but that seems to never end.
Yeah, and seeing all these young UFC prodigies coming to the ring
Yes, sir.
just shows how times have changed, but yet while some things change, some things stay the same in the world of UFC.
Exactly. Yep.
So thanks for hopping on, Brett, and hopefully this week goes well for your DFS players and betting card.
Hopefully so, man. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you.